Hello there, hello. We've got a new Microsoft certification to talk about. We've got an Azure Enterprise Data Analyst Associate certification that's just appeared over the last couple of weeks. It's going into beta in mid-April, so we've got a bit of time to get up to speed with what this certification actually is. It's backed by one exam, the DP-500. And as usual, the exam called something different. And we've got designing and implementing enterprise scale analytics solutions using Microsoft Azure and Microsoft Power BI. Of particular interest to me because it has several Azure data platform services all tied into this one certification. So it's quite interesting for me to see what are you expected to know across these different technologies. And ultimately, who is this aimed for? What role is this Azure Enterprise Data Analyst Associate? Okay. So if we have a little look, we got some text to go through, and all of this is available on the Microsoft certification site. So I've got a link in the description so you can go there. And essentially, they've got paragraphs of text. I like to take those paragraphs of text and just pull out the pertinent bits of information, right? So this really is available on the Microsoft certification website. Because I'm interested to know, well, what role does this play, really? So who is this designed for? What are you expected to know? So on responsibilities, okay, we've got a very kind of vague performing advanced data analytics at scale. Okay, so that's not really drilling into any detail there, but we do get some more as we go through. So we've got cleaning and transforming data. Okay, so as you can probably imagine, there's going to be some M involved on the Power BI side. Now we've got enterprise data models, so large data models. So maybe some large data set format there. And it's probably that word enterprise also, it kind of gives away some of the software that it might be using, some of the platforms like Synapse. Okay. Then we've got some more sort of admin related. So we've got IT infrastructure and we've got development lifecycle practices. Okay. And also I've just missed off that incorporating advanced analytics, so adding in sort of machine learning capabilities. And then Microsoft have said, okay, well, this is your enterprise, data analyst. In terms of what they do in an organization, okay, so we've got that collect enterprise level requirements. They're really hitting in with that word enterprise. Okay, 4 platforms that include Azure and Power BI. We've got some data governance. Okay, so there's a particular platform for data governance in Azure, and we've got config settings, administration, monitoring data usage, and optimizing performance. So we've got some administration tasks in there as well. Something in the DA-100, the Power BI Data Analyst exam, which has moved on now into under the Power Platform certification process, I believe, had some administration but wasn't really that kind of focused on it. So it's interesting to see that here. Ultimately, when you're going to sit this exam, if you like the look of the profile of what this certification does and you think, hey, I want to be an Azure Enterprise Data Analyst, we've got some advanced Power BI skills. What does advanced mean? Okay, hopefully the skills measured is going to tell us what that is. We've got managing data repositories and data processing in the cloud and on premises. Yeah, so maybe some gateway knowledge there. Power Query and DAX, how much? How much are we going to have to know about those two languages? And there we go. We've got our first call out of a data platform service, Synapse Analytics. Big product, lots of services in that product. What's going to be expected in this DP-500? Okay, we've got analysing data using T-SQL and visualising data, almost like a little footnote. Okay, so it seems that it's more around the data and the modeling and the connectivity with these data services rather than, let's say, the visualization side. They also talk about the roles that the enterprise data analyst interacts with and collaborates with. And that's quite interesting as well, because it's like, where does that role sit in, an organization? Okay, now you can, probably play multiple roles. You could be the data analyst and do a bit of data engineering as well. But we've got solution architects. Okay, so that enterprise data analyst, coming with that, Synapse Analytics and Power BI knowledge. We've got data engineers, probably working on the Synapse Analytics side of things, less so on the Power BI. Data scientists, so maybe that enterprise data analyst is talking to those data scientists and telling them the best way of getting data out of these systems and working with data in these systems as well. AI engineers, we had something in that profile which said, the ability to add in advanced analytics capabilities. Your friendly DBAs, yeah. If you're going to be hammering these systems with Power BI, what impact is it going to have on those systems? And Power BI data analysts, the people that are, day to day with Power BI, modeling. Maybe that enterprise data analyst helps that go-between from those analysts and those data engineers to kind of tie up the communication between, Synapse and Power BI. So it's quite an interesting role that sits there. Now, in terms of the actual services, so I've, all I've really done is I've just kind of pulled out what services are involved, based on the skills being measured, right? We've got Power BI, of course. We've got Power BI front and center there. Then we've got Synapse Analytics. Okay, big product, right? Now, there is a data engineering certification, the DP-500, which covers a lot of the Synapse Analytics functionality. You've got dedicated SQL pools, you've got serverless SQL pools, Spark pools, pipelines, logging. I can't imagine that this certification is really going to be expecting you to know each and every one of those services. And in fact, when we have a look at the skills measured, I really think it's only looking at 2. We've got Synapse, one of the services, serverless SQL pools connecting to Data Lake Gen2, and Power BI connecting to Data Lake Gen2. Now we've got our data governance tool in there. We've got Purview. Purview connects to Power BI. The skills measured kind of shows some knowledge is required there. And we've got DevOps. I've put Azure DevOps up there as well, because that's how I understand integrating Synapse Analytics and Power BI in terms of source control and deployment. We've also got some tools as well. So we've got Tabular Editor 2, which is the free open source version. Got Vertipack Analyzer and DAX Studio. So we've got some tools there. So as you can see, you can kind of see the relationship between the services that DP-500 is covering, and you can kind of get a map of the services. Okay, and for me, I really find it useful to kind of be able to visualize the skills measured, really. So you're expected to, be able to, connect and understand Power BI to Synapse, how Purview connects into Power BI. This is just my rough draft, in terms of what services are connecting to what. But as you can see, DP-500, quite interesting. Now we're going to go into the skills measured. Now there's quite a lot of skills measured here, but I want to pick out a few. Otherwise, if we were going to go through all of them, we'd be here all day. But I'm quite interested in pulling out some of these skills measured. So again, I'll put the link to the certification in the description of the video. Okay, look, we've got the text there. I've just pulled the text out, to break it down a little bit more easily. Okay, and we can see that we have got one exam to take. All right, so let's have a look at that. The DP-500, okay, exam will be available in mid-April. Okay, and I'm going to scroll past all of this stuff and get to the skills measured. Okay, so we've got 4 categories. Looks like the percentages are roughly equal across those 4 categories. Okay, let's have a scroll up. Let's go down to our first category. So we've got implement and manage a data analytics environment. So like I said, I'm not going to go into each and every one of these skills measured, but I want to call out a few. So we've got Purview. Okay, now, you might already be working with Power BI and Synapse Analytics and Data Lake Gen2 and those tools and DevOps. But Purview, you might not have been working with it. It's a reasonably new platform. It's quite difficult to work with just on your own tenant because, it's a service that costs. As soon as you provision that service, it starts charging you. There's no way of pausing. You have to, destroy the infrastructure and recreate it every time you want to use Purview in your own tenant, like I do. So perhaps the documentation is going to be enough for you to understand, well, how do you manage Power BI assets with Azure Purview and identify data sources in Azure by using Purview? So how does it connect in to Synapse Analytics, to dedicated SQL pools, to serverless SQL pools? Okay, so if you don't have access to Purview, it's going to be a little bit tricky on that front. But there are some documentation to go through that. So I'm wondering if that'll be enough. Okay, we've got some Power BI admin REST APIs. I'm not going to go into the Power BI specifics. It's the other services and what you're expected to know. That's kind of what I'm interested in here. Okay, so we've got how to configure the Power BI tenant to integrate with Data Lake Gen2 for data flows. I'd assume on there. We've got integrating an existing Power BI workspace into Synapse Analytics. So within Synapse Analytics, within the studio, you can create a connection or a linked service to Power BI, and you can actually author data sets and reports within the studio itself. So it looks like you're going to be expected to know how to do that. Again, loads of documentation as learn modules specific to that skill. We've got commit code and artifacts to a source control repository. So maybe not just Azure DevOps. There could be some GitHub in there as well. I only ever use Azure DevOps with my Azure resources. Okay, but we've got Synapse Analytics. So how do we source control our Synapse Analytics workspaces? Okay, and we've got deployment pipelines in Power BI. Okay, query and transform data. Right, so this is where we get to Synapse Analytics. Okay, now again, it's not looking like you're going to have deep grain knowledge of Synapse Analytics. And to be quite honest with you, if you were predominantly using Power BI, that's quite a bit of an ask to do that. But at the very least, it's asking you, well, in a scenario, in a situation, which one of the Synapse pools would you use in this scenario? And there's plenty of information about, well, when do you choose dedicated? When do you choose serverless? Again, there's docs, there's learn modules that take you through which Synapse pool is good for what scenario. It would be interesting if it's constrained to just dedicated and serverless. With Spark, with the Spark pools, you don't connect to Spark pools using Power BI. You just use the Spark pools for data transformation and ML in Synapse. So I'm mostly sure it's going to be dedicated and serverless. Okay, we've got serverless SQL pools there. Yeah, there we go. Serverless SQL pools. Okay, so recommend appropriate file types for querying serverless SQL pools. That might be a nod to using Parquet file format. Okay, so yeah, so we've got dedicated and serverless SQL pools being called out in query relational data sources using a machine learning predict function in a query. So I've never done this, but as I understand it, in T-SQL, there is a predict function that you can use to call a machine learning model to score data that's stored in dedicated SQL pool. And actually, I think in a Spark pool as well. Okay, then we've got some ingest and transform data. So yeah, identify data loading performance bottlenecks in Power Query or data sources. Okay, so with dedicated, we've got that concept of workload management. Queries are assigned certain percentage of resources. I wonder if there's anything about that in there. Okay, carry on again. Let's have a look at implementing and managing data models. Okay, so we've got choose when to use direct query for Power BI data sets. Okay, that'll be interesting. That'll be interesting to see, well, what's Microsoft's expectation on you choosing direct query? I don't know yet. What else have we got? Yep, we've got design and building large format data sets. Composite models, aggregations. I would think that it's possibly constrained to creating manual aggregations, automatic aggregations. Synapse Analytics dedicated SQL pools supports it. I wonder whether there'll be anything in there around setting up automatic aggregations. Okay, so if you're looking to read up and learn about aggregations, I recommend, looking up the manual aggregations and automatic aggregations as well. Okay, and then we've got optimizing enterprise scale data models. This is where it looks like you've got your tools, your DAX Studio, your tabular editor, Vertipack analyzer, incremental refresh. Okay, maybe hybrid tables in there as well. Again, like the aggregations skills measured, not sure how new they want you to know. I mean, this is a beta exam that isn't even out yet. Now, what's interesting in the explore and visualize data is there's nothing. There is around creating visuals in Power BI. So we've got R and Python visuals in Power BI. Okay. Design and configure Power BI reports for accessibility. That's great. And, I was reading that documentation the other week about how to create accessible reports. So, a lot of these skills, I've got a blog coming out in a week or two where for my own learning, I'm attaching the documentation and the learn modules for each one of these, if there is a learn module and if there is documentation and relevant blog posts, and yeah, it's literally a page in the Microsoft documentation in how to configure those reports and do things like enable personalized visuals in a report. Love that feature. What's interesting here is exploring data by using Azure Synapse Analytics. So we've got explore data by using native visuals in Spark notebooks. Okay, that would mean that it's expecting you to run a Spark workload, get a result set back, and then use the inbuilt visuals in Synapse Studio in the notebook, in the notebooks to create data visualizations. Okay, but also the data visualizations that are available when you just run SQL queries against dedicated and serverless. Again, it's got its own, visualizations. Very, very basic, but you can still visualize data there. So being able to do those two things is quite interesting. Anyway, so that was just a video summary where I just wanted to have a look at this DP-500. Very interesting exam, very interesting certification. I am wondering where it sits in that role. Very interesting role. Yeah, that role can work alongside data engineers and Power BI analysts to optimize the connection and the way in which Synapse Analytics is working with Power BI. Because I think that's becoming more important in terms of optimizing, how Power BI and Synapse Analytics is working together. So yeah, beta's coming out, mid-April. If you want to get on the beta, then I think there'll probably be some exam vouchers available. Microsoft will, they love feedback as well. I did the DA-100, the Power BI, when it was in beta, and felt that that was a good experience. So yeah, DP-500. Let's see what it's all about when it comes out.